Recording. So hi everyone, welcome to AT Training webinar today. We're really pleased to be joined by Jess Powell, who's a highly specialist speech and language therapist from Rochdale, working in their CAMS team. And she's going to deliver a webinar today on supporting autistic young people and adults with a profile of demand avoidance. So just a few housekeeping bits and bobs before we get started. So my name's Fran, I'm one of the clinical managers at AT Therapy. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box throughout the webinar, so please write any questions for Jess in there, and then I will make sure we have some time at the end for Jess to answer these. As I mentioned, the webinar is being recorded and that will be uploaded to our AT Therapy Videos YouTube channel. So thank you very much for joining us, and I will hand over to Jess now to go through the webinar. Thanks, Jess.
You're welcome. So hello, good afternoon, everybody. It's lunchtime. So as we said, I'm Jess Powell. I'm a highly specialist speech and language therapist, but I never use that title. I kind of just go with the whatever. So I do work in a CAMS service. So when I was asked to do the webinar today, I thought this would probably be quite a helpful one. And I was laughing before because I'm quite an animated person. And normally when I give training, I'm pacing around. And so if my arms are waving around wildly, it's because I'm trying to contain myself to a screen. So I'm not sure how much people are aware of kind of a demand avoidant type autism or autism with a profile of demand avoidance. Some people might have heard of the term PDA, which is pathological demand avoidance, is that kind of official title. And what I often say to people, so people often come into us as a CAMS service, or will come into kind of, independent clinics asking specifically for a diagnosis of PDA. So I think what's maybe misunderstood about it is that PDA on its own isn't a standalone diagnosis. So you have to have a diagnosis of autism. It's part of the autism spectrum. And the thing I always say about PDA is it's a horrible term, like pathological. Pathological's just got so many connotations to it that's not nice and makes it kind of seem like a really bad thing. So what we need to understand is that PDA, or autism with a demand avoidant profile, however you want to call it, I've kind of interspersed them because it's called different things in whatever you read on different websites or in different articles. It's not listed in the DSM-5 or ICD-10 diagnostic manuals. So at the moment, it doesn't exist in any of those specific manuals. So it's not a diagnosis on its own. So it's first discussed by Elizabeth Newson. So some people might be aware of the Elizabeth Newson Centre. I can't remember where that is, but there is a specific centre who kind of specialise, and some people will kind of go to the Elizabeth Newson Centre to look at kind of demand avoidant profile. And she first talked about it in 2003. So it's been kind of knocking around for a little while. But it's been a massive political hot potato. So if anybody works in this field around kind of autism and behaviour, that kind of PDA thing has been rattling around for years, where it's like, no, we don't diagnose it, it's not a thing. But there is now a growing body of kind of professionals who understand that, that autism with a profile of demand avoidance is something that's there and we can't ignore it. There is a pocket of children who have this kind of behaviour profile. So that's another way you might hear it described. It's autism with a behaviour profile of demand avoidance. So when you're looking at, there are some specific things you can look at, some kind of diagnostic tools. So the DISCO, which is a standardized developmental history assessment, which was developed by Lorna Wing and a variety of other people. I've got 11 items on the DISCO algorithm that are kind of demand avoidance specific. So if anybody does do the DISCO, you can kind of pick out 11 key items that are kind of known to be particularly kind of indicative of a demand avoidant profile. But very often you don't go somewhere where someone will do a DISCO. So a DISCO stands for like diagnostic interview of social communication, some things. And there's also the EDAQ that if you Google, you can find it. So it's developed by Liz O'Nyans and a variety of people. And that is a questionnaire that you kind of get a score. So there's a certain kind of threshold to meet that's kind of a bit of a screener, I guess. So if you've got some queries around demand avoidant profile, you can have a look at the EDAQ, which is widely available online. So there is a link there, but the link won't work on the webinar, but it's very easy to find. Just Google it. So there are specific things you can look at, but very often it's around just understanding the behaviour itself. So we'll talk a little bit about that next. So can I have the next slide, please? So when we look at kind of identifying demand avoidant type autism or autism with a profile of demand avoidance, it can be really difficult. It can be really, really difficult to kind of pull apart what is what, because as we know that, well, everybody avoids demands. Everybody avoids demands. If you don't want to do something, you'll avoid doing it. And that's just standard. That's not kind of pathologized in any way. You know, everybody will avoid things they don't like and they don't feel comfortable with. But all people with a diagnosis of autism will avoid demands to a certain extent. So it's having a look at when that becomes something that is kind of above and beyond a kind of ASD profile, and you have that kind of additional demand avoidant profile. So often, and this is definitely, I was kind of thinking about this when I wrote it, it's definitely in practice what I see. So they are often missed. Kids with an autism diagnosis with a profile of demand avoidance are often missed because they often don't fit a conventional view of autism. They often don't present. They're extremely good at masking, and masking is a very very trendy subject at the minute. So masking, you know, being able to keep a lid on things, being able to wear different hats in different situations. And, you know, you have schools saying they're absolutely fine here, no issues at all. No issues at all. They're absolutely perfect, charming. But then they go home and the wheels come off and they can't cope because they've kept that lid on managing those demands all day. Autism can appear less apparent, likely because of that autism, but also because they are masking and they are so aware of kind of avoiding demands that they kind of have all these strategies to very naturally avoid demands. And sometimes you don't even realize you've been like demand avoidanted until it's actually happened. You know, I've been in many an assessment where I'm just like, hang on a minute, I'm on the floor, they're riding me like a horse and I don't quite know I was meant to be doing an ADAS. I'm not sure how I've got from that thing to another. So they're often very skilled at kind of demand avoiding, but in a way that you don't necessarily think they are. It's often misunderstood, demand avoidance, and there's a lot of focus on behavior and what's the behavior, like just, you know, well, they're fighting, they're running away, they're crying, they're screaming, treated as bad behavior. And, you know, if anybody, you know, as a speech and language therapist, you know, that bad behavior is like, drives me mad, because there's always a function to behavior. So it's always having a look at what is the function of the behavior. Often, and again, I see this so often, they will come in and say, I'm just getting blamed. I'm just getting, like parents will say, I'm just getting blamed. They're saying that I'm too soft. I've caused this because I'm not putting boundaries in place. But if I put boundaries in place, people are getting hurt. And a lot of parents will very naturally, when you're just talking to them about, you know, what happens, how they manage their child, what works, what doesn't work, they very naturally fall into a kind of a non-directive demand avoidant type way of working with their children, their young people, children, adults. so I saw someone recently who was 22 who had a pre-existing diagnosis of autism, but was coming back to have a look at, because he'd questioned whether he was presenting with a demand avoidant profile because of the challenges that he'd experienced. And he absolutely did. And he came out with some of the best quotes I've ever heard. So he has been very misunderstood through a variety of ways. But even for him, sleep, he says that he can't sleep because he tries to go to sleep and his brain's like, you reckon you're going to sleep? You're having a laugh, aren't you? And it just won't let him go to sleep because of the demand. So he's awake all night and he sleeps in the day because there's no perceived demand of going to sleep in the day. It's very interesting. It was, you know, I've got a number of quotes from him that have just been absolutely, it's just like spokesman for demand avoidant autism. And that's nothing to do with, you know, parenting. And that's not saying that, you know, some people don't get the approaches right, because actually completely changing your life to a non-directive approach is really, really tough. But yeah, very often these are the parents that come in that feel like they've absolutely been kind of dragged through a hedge and not believed, and often blamed and said they're too soft. When actually you can see that they actually have a pretty good understanding of their child and they're doing what they can to keep their head above water. And I think it's also remembering that it's not the only cause of extreme demand avoidance. There's other conditions that can kind of cause extreme demand avoidance. So trauma. So young people who've experienced trauma will demand avoid as a means of kind of maintaining control. So yeah, an attachment trauma presentation. As I said, everybody demand avoids at times of kind of challenge. People without a profile of demand avoidance will with autism without that demand avoidant profile will demand avoid at times of high stress and anxiety. It's whether it happens all the time and is pervasive. They're often misdiagnosed, and again, I see this quite a lot. So they may get a diagnosis of ODD, so opposition defiance disorder, conduct disorder, reactive attachment disorder. And that's not saying that they might not have those things. But what kind of in my experience is that people that have come in with those kinds of labels attached to them, which are really, I think the ODD conduct disorder diagnoses are really challenging and have a lot of kind of stigma attached to them. Actually, when you unpick it, and you unpick what's the function of the behaviour, very often there is a kind of demand avoidant element to it. Reactive attachment disorder is a bit more tricky because it often takes a bit more kind of unpicking. Then you get into the minefield of what is autism, what is trauma, what is ASD, which is a whole topic for another day. So there has been research by Judy Eaton and Kaylee Weaver. So Judy Eaton is another person that does quite a lot of work around demand avoidance. So PDA, demand avoidance, is in NICE guidelines under the umbrella of an ASD diagnosis. And what the NICE guidelines say around autism with a profile of demand avoidance is that it should be recognised, not as a standalone diagnosis, but the profile, the behaviour profile associated should be recognised in order to make sure that the approaches and the strategies are correct. So if we go on to the next slide. So some characteristics. So obviously I've got an hour to talk today, and everyone jokes with me that if you wind me up and just set me off, I'm like one of those like wind up toys. One that just keeps going, and I could talk forever. So I've tried to kind of keep this as a whistle stop tour, but obviously, and to kind of whet people's appetites and get thinking about it really. So I'm just kind of going through it, kind of the basics, just give you a bit of a flavour. So characteristics of a demand avoidant type presentation are, it's basically the fundamentals of it are extreme anxiety. So not a little bit of anxiety, extreme anxiety about pressure, demands, rules, or expectations being placed on someone. So they feel out of control. So there are kind of similar to an ASD presentation. So, you know, I always say that actually everybody would engage in bad behavior if they were feeling really unsafe in their world. So actually what people with ASD or ASD with a profile demand avoidance, the behaviors they resort to, we would probably all resort to if we felt like, you know, we were faced with our biggest fears and biggest challenges all day, every day. So, but it's extreme anxiety relating to pressure and demands. It can be, and the interesting thing is that it can be pressure from yourself as well as others. So an internal demand, an internal expectation. So, you know, that expectation that, you know, I have to get 10 out of 10 on a test. That's perfectionist tendencies. I have to get, no one else has said you have to get 10 out of 10 on a test, but that is that demand in yourself. Or I've made a promise to somebody that I'll try and go to school 3 out of 5 days this week, you know, and you might have set that goal, but then that internal kind of demand and pressure on yourself becomes really challenging. So strategies for supporting people with demand avoidance, it's a lot of negotiation, and there's a lot of focus on what language we use and how we give requests and how we think about that, which I'll talk about towards the end. So traditional autism, and this is, I think, the big kicker really, and this is the thing that always gets my mind whirring when I have a conversation with people when they come into an assessment. I'll say, right, okay, so what are you doing? What strategy are you doing? And you'll say, right, okay, so what about visuals? How do they go? Oh, well, they tear them off the wall. Visual timetables have never worked. I had someone that ate their visual timetable. They normally hate them. Kids with a demand avoidant profile, they'll be the ones that have ripped them off the wall, can't cope with visuals, hate that. And they don't like schedules. They struggle with that kind of really regimented routine, which works beautifully for, you know, most kids with an ASD profile, traditional ASD profile. So when those strategies don't work, and rewards and schedules that are put in place. Oh, here's a nice like working for chart, you know, get 5 tokens and then you can have, you know, this. Well, that's a massive demand, isn't it? And a massive expectation. And even though they might really want the thing, just that demand in itself where, oh my gosh, like I've got to get a token, like I can't cope with this, or I'm not doing that because you've just told me to do that so you can, you know, get lost. Because it makes them feel out of control. And you would, you know, in some kids, they find that sameness of having that routine and that visual timetable, or having that, you know, lovely working for chart, you know, I get 5 tokens and then I get my reward. Would love that. But actually for a child with, or a young person, adult with a demand avoidant profile, that just makes them feel more out of control. And you can seek control in a number of ways. Acting in roles, I've already talked about that, kind of that masking. They will assume a role, and that could be being an absolutely model pupil in school, you know, that kind of. And I've seen it, and I've seen it 2 ways around. So I've seen them in clinic first, where I'm just like, ooh, like, how on earth do you do it in school? Then I've gone into school and I'm like, you are really good. So they will act in role, and it's not just that, it can be that, but actually a lot of the young people that we see, I've seen them in an assessment and they've gone through various roles within kind of a couple of hours. So assuming a baby role, that's one we see quite often. So I can't, like, going into that kind of baby, talking in a baby voice, kind of hovering next to parents. I've had some kids with demand avoidant autism that have still kind of gone up mum's tops to kind of, or still wanted to kind of like soothe themselves through breastfeeding, because it kind of resorting to that baby. Because if I'm a baby, well, I can't do demands, can I? Just can't. Resisting demands, that's an obvious one. So like, I'm not doing that, but it can be verbally, I'm not doing that, or it can be, you know, kicking off as the term, having a meltdown. Changing the topic or task, you see that all of the time. That's what I was saying before, is that sometimes it's like, oh, how have I found myself in this sort of situation where, you know, I thought I was doing one thing and it's completely ended up being another thing. And a lot of kids with demand avoidant profile are really good at that. or doing, you'll be saying, all right, we're just going to do this, and like, oh, I'm just going to tell you about this, and then you end up having like a 20-minute kind of monologue discussion about Minecraft or pocket watches I had the other day, or catalytic converters on cars I also had the other day, and you kind of get sucked in, and then it's like, oh, kind of gone, right, I need to pull you back now, but then you kind of try and pull it back, and then they will just put another barrier in place. Hiding or withdrawing, and again, that's another big one that we see. Running away as well, so absconding, hiding in the bathroom, locking. A lot of kind of young people in high school. I've got a lot, I would say, of young people with a demand avoidant profile that are now school refusers. And that placement has broken down, I think, just because if you think about the number of demands in a school day, and even the perceived demand of going to school itself is just mad. So withdrawal as well. So I've got lots of young people that spend, lots of lesson time in the toilet, or wandering around corridors in school, not going, or just shutting down, withdrawing, not engaging in lessons, or at home withdrawing to the bedroom, not coming out. So they are all classic ways of kind of maintaining control of your world in order to avoid demand. So we've gone to the next slide. So what are demands? So, and apologies for this rubbish slide. I used to be really good at PowerPoint, and now I'm just kind of not PowerPoint queen anymore. So demands, there's lots of different demands. So we have direct questions or questions from others. So that's quite an obvious one. But that can be even something as simple as, what do you want for tea? And that making choices is difficult, for lots of young people on the spectrum, because that's that element of, oh, what if I don't make the right choice? And what if I decide I want fish fingers, but actually when I get the fish fingers, what if I don't like the fish fingers? So making choices are difficult anyway, but the demand associated with making a choice or responding to a question is a challenge. Or even getting into a squabble about having a bath or a shower, massive demand. But often they're going to school, or getting ready in the morning, going to school thing is kind of one of the biggest demands, and going to bed. And demands within demands. So like I was talking to you about, think about a really simple one of having a shower. So there's the demand itself of, right, you're going to go and have a shower. And that might be a stressful experience anyway, if they don't like the water, and then all the element of the sequencing and the executive function that's required around having a shower. But then the demands within the demand are that there's the shower. But then the demand within that is, right, I have to go and get my clothes off, because actually that's a demand. You have to take your clothes off to get in the shower. And then you go in the shower, and it's like, well, you might just want to sit there, but actually you've got to wash your body, you've got to wash your face, you've got to wash your hair. So there's actually lots of demand in a fairly, what we would see as a simple task of having a shower. And school is the same. So it's just, go to school, get over that demand of going to school. But then all the demands that are placed on you in school, you have to behave a certain way. You have to get to this lesson on time. You have to get to that lesson on time. You can't eat your lunch there. You have to eat your lunch in this place. You've got your homework, and so if you think about it, it's just mad, the whole list of demands that are required to just get through a school day. Our own internal demands. So like I was talking before around, the expectations and the demands we put on ourselves. Because a lot of the kids that I see do have an element of remorse, and they can't help it. They have a meltdown, and they are often really remorseful afterwards and beat themselves up. But actually in the moment when that red mist is setting and they are trying to get away from that demand, they just really can't cope. And things we want and like to do, not just what we have to do, which sounds really weird. But if you think about it, so hobbies, and I always like to try and find the me equivalent in a lot of these things, and kind of how would I feel in that sort of situation. So there's certain things that are never an issue, but just think about it. Like, I really like going out and meeting my friends, but again, there's a lot of demands within that, aren't there? Kind of wash my hair, put my makeup on, put some nice clothes on, yada yada yada. But I really like that, and I'm motivated to do that. That kind of charges my battery. Then the other one is, I do like running, and I know that it will make me feel better, but actually the idea of it is really rubbish. But actually I can talk myself through that demand and say, right, okay, Jess, it's okay. You've signed up to do a marathon in May. If you don't actually go out running, you're going to need a defibrillator. And I can kind of talk myself through that demand. But if you think about what that demand would kind of, even if someone liked the essence of running, just that demand would just stop them from doing it. So a lot of the young people that I see, if they are at a period of time where they're really, really struggling, they will shut themselves away from even like preferred activities. That ought to feelings of daily life. So just that, gotta go and brush my teeth. I ought to go and brush my teeth because that's the done thing, and my teeth will fall out if I don't. That's a demand. I think we probably all have those days, don't we? Not necessarily brushing your teeth, but those days when you're just like, oh God, I need to go and do, I need to go and cook dinner. I really can't be bothered, but I know I need to. So we all have those feelings, but for someone with a demand avoidant profile, it's multiplied. And I'll talk about it more in a minute, just about kind of the general levels of stress. And nobody can cope with demand anyway when they're stressed. Indirect demands. Praise is a really interesting one. A lot of the well, not just young kids, a lot of the people that I see with a demand avoidant profile of autism just cannot cope with praise. They cannot cope with praise at all. They just don't know how. It's a demand. They don't know how do you react. Someone says, oh, that's a really beautiful picture, that's amazing, and they're just like don't know. There's like an expectation here that I'm supposed to react in a certain way, and I don't know how to react. So I've had people that pictures have been praised and they've screwed them up and thrown them in the bin. You can't cope with that praise. Other people's like energy and excitement about things. So a friend, a young person could be with a friend, and a friend's just like, yeah, I'm really looking forward to this, and then that just like, oh my gosh, they're really excited about this, but I'm really nervous, but then becomes a demand to kind of live up to that energy and that expectation. Uncertainty is also a demand, that kind of demand of having to manage that uncertainty. So there's lots of different demands, and if you think about just really simple activities of daily living, brushing your teeth, having a shower, getting dressed, they all have a certain element of demand to manage. So go on to the next slide. So there's a hierarchy of demands, and I've not developed this. I think I stole it from, it's there, Newcastle University Hierarchy of Avoidance Approaches. So it goes from, I think I always say, don't expect people with, and you hear this like PDA, pathological demand avoidance. I do hate that word, pathological. When you do hear it, you think that they're always going to be like, rah, and they're not. There's a hierarchy of ways they will generally move to. Nobody ends up at crisis for no reason. Things layer and they bubble, and that's what happens. And I always talk about like an assault cycle and arousal cycle, and it is a roller coaster. So nobody goes through their day, if you think about it kind of like a curve, nobody goes through their day completely like flatlining on a curve of emotional regulation, like a completely zen-like state. Nobody does. But a lot of our young people, I would say, particularly our kind of demand avoidant kids, are going up and down on this emotional roller coaster. And they can maintain it to a certain level, but when you hit crisis point, and then it's a matter of kind of maintaining safety then. So at the bottom, you have someone who maybe is demand avoiding, but they're keeping a lid on it. They're calm, they're able to cope. And then the next stage that you might see, so it's like, oh, too many demands now, can't cope with this. You might get the distraction. Oh, look over there. Oh, look over there. Oh, look out the window. I've had that. Like, I've been doing an assessment and they're like, oh, what does that poster say? Or I had one that answered all the questions with like comments that they found on posters around the room. Excuses. So, oh, I can't do that. Can't do that. I've got a bad leg. Or oh, I can't do that. Like, you know, walk the dog, can't do that. Dog's just said they don't want to go for a walk. I know someone who does that. They blame everything on the dog. And procrastination. So just that kind of dragging your feet, putting things off, you know, not doing things at this stage. Yeah. So we've gone from being able to kind of manage to the subtle, not massively obvious demand avoiding at this point. And then the next stage up is physical incapacitation. So shutting down. Withdrawal into fantasy. So often see this as well. So, and it can be really subtle. So I've got lots of young people and they'll tell a story and I'm like, I'm not sure that's happened. Like I saw someone recently who told this story. I sat there thinking that didn't happen. So I always tell a story in my assessment about at Knowsley Safari Park, a vulture flew into the back of my head at the bird show. True story. And I'm scared of birds. So then this girl, because there was obviously like a bit of a demand to reply to my conversational kind of press that, oh, you know, that woman's just said she got hit in the back of the head by a vulture. So she said, oh, I know somebody that went to one and a hawk got its claws tangled in her hair and pulled like half a hair off. And I was thinking, I don't think that happened. And I was like, I don't think that's happened, but they just didn't know how to cope in the situation. Or I have had young people who, I don't know if anyone's familiar, it's very commonly seen here where I work, people resorting to animal behavior. So behaving like a dog or a cat or an animal, because you don't do demands, do you? And the same as kind of reverting into that baby kind of voice and that baby persona. And reducing meaningful conversation. So it's kind of, you know, reverting to something in a fantasy world where the demands, you don't do demands because you're a dog or you're a cat or you're a baby, or you reduce, you kind of start to withdraw and shut down a little bit. The next layer up, which we often see particularly in schools, is taking control completely or complete compliance. So completely in school, fixed smile, like fine. Like someone will say, you know, are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. Absolutely fine. Absolutely fine. And then they'll leave the school gates, because I've seen it, and they'll leave the school gates. And as soon as they've crossed the threshold, they have battered parents, black and blue. They've run into the road. They have, you know, they've completely, as I said, like the wheels just came off and completely could not contain it any longer. I've had it in sessions here where, you know, I've thought the young person's been fine, you know, and I'm, you know, well, like to think I'm quite skilled in kind of managing demands, but have maybe not quite got it right or not kind of read the situation right. And they've left here and completely had a meltdown, or well, parents often say they just had a meltdown in the car, and you wouldn't have known it within the session. They've kind of managed to contain it. And then at the top of the pyramid is upset agitation to the extremes, self-harm, you know, not to be scary, but that's kind of the reality that it can happen. Shutting down completely. So I've got a lot of young people who have shut down completely. The good news is that, you know, there are things that we can do. I'll kind of go, when we go through some of the strategies, I'll go through, I've got a really beautiful scenario actually, which is a really happy ending to a tricky situation for a number of years. Aggression, which is kind of fairly the obvious one that people would often associate with demand avoidance, and running away. And I think it's just that at the point where you get to this final point in the pyramid, you are at fight, flight, freeze, and it just panic. So you're at crisis point if you hit that top of the pyramid. And at that point, there's not a lot you can do apart from keeping them safe. And it's just understanding that, you know, fight, flight, freeze is our primitive response. It's our primitive response to keep us safe. And if you feel that you are just completely overwhelmed by the demands and you can't cope anymore, that's what you do to keep, that's what you do. Anybody that was pushed to it would do that. And at that point, there's very little kind of therapeutically you can do. It's just around kind of maintaining safety. And then once you've kind of come down that curve a little bit on that kind of arousal cycle, then you can talk it through. And escalation can be rapid, it can be slow, and it can be a slow burn. So I've got some young people who are demand avoidant that have held it together within a school situation for months and months and months. And then I've had a very physical kind of reaction to the stress. So that's the girl I was talking about before. I'll kind of run through that at the end as just a bit of a so escalation can also be really rapid if it's pushed too hard, and you can go from seemingly fine to, you know, and lots of people say there's no trigger, they just go from 0 to 60, and I'm like, yeah, no, it's they've been bubbling. It's just they've pushed it and they've kind of escalated really quickly. So, and the thing that tends to shoot things up the pyramid are increasing the demands, increasing anxiety, just reducing, you kind of just lose a bit of tolerance, like I just can't do this, and just can't do this anymore, it's grating on me. And that feeling of losing, that increasing feeling of losing control, that tends to shoot people up the pyramid. So if we go on to the next slide, what doesn't help? So I've just put this here again, we talked about this before really, but it's just around traditional kind of ASD strategies just don't help. So first, next trips, visual timetables, as I said, they often get pulled off the wall, and like reward charts and that kind of thing, because they're too much of a demand. And obviously your obvious things like shouting, getting into like a massive battle of wills, that's not going to work either. And a friend of, I've got a friend of mine who's a psychologist whose daughters have got demand avoidant profile, and even her, when she went to kind of appointments, her parenting was questioned, like, we need to be firmer, and she's just like, no, you can't be firmer, that doesn't work. You can't, I always say you can't out rigid someone on the spectrum, and you can't out rigid or get into a massive kind of battle of wills with someone with PDA, because it will, or demand avoidant type autism. So if we go on to the next slide, we'll go on to what does help. So strategies to increase kind of that perception of control, but with overall boundaries and expectations. So there has to be, I'm a parent, I've got 2 children, I know what it's like. And I know what it's like, I'm a clinician, I work kind of, with lots of different young people with lots of different kind of profiles. So it's around, I would say the key to it is allowing the young person, young adult, the feelings of being in control, but fundamentally you are in control of it. And there's ways of doing that. It's not easy, and there's not a magic wand, and but once you get it, I would say, and once you're practiced at it, it then is quite easy and becomes second nature. I can very easily now slip into a kind of a demand avoidant. I've got a friend who I assess with, who'll watch my videos, and she's just like, oh, you're good. And I'm just like, it's just second nature now, but it's hard when you first start doing it. So offering a playful and light-hearted tone, so not getting into that kind of being really overly assertive or so making it light-hearted just kind of reduces the demand in itself. Helping the young person feel that they have a choice, and offering options of how to do a task. So, you've got, so for example, I'm trying to think of those. Right, okay. So I've got a real life example. This is fairly kind of, I always think it helps to give kind of a bit of a way out there example. So I had a young person who, as a punishment to his mum during lockdown, put all of his rubbish in the drawer under her bed. And refused to move it. So she was like, what am I going to do? He's refusing to move it. And yeah. So I just said, okay. I said, the non-negotiable. So I talk a lot about negotiables and non-negotiables. So the non-negotiable is that rubbish needs moving. But the negotiable is when it needs to be moved by. So that's the bit you can kind of like wiggle a little bit. So we kind of said that, okay, the non-negotiable is that rubbish needs moving and you need to move it. But say, okay, I don't mind when you move it, but it just needs to be moved by Sunday. And depending on how inflexible a child is, depends on kind of how maybe long you leave the gap between when you want them to do it, when you give the instruction and when you want them to have completed it. So I've just suggested that for another family at the moment as well, who she trashes a room when she's upset or agitated, and then won't tidy it up. And I said, right, okay, well, let's maybe see if you could give that and just say, okay, or break it down into, you maybe can't do the entire room and we'll help you, that negotiation. So the non-negotiable is it needs tidying, but the negotiation is, right, okay, I'll do this bit if, you do that bit. So it's breaking things down a little bit, but also giving a choice of, or also, you need to have a shower. You could, it's up to you anytime between now and the time you go to bed. So the non-negotiable is you have a shower. The negotiable is you do it now or you do it after tea or whatever. Making the task feel less pressured. So doing that also makes the task, taking that, you need to have a shower now. You need to have a shower now. Just have a shower now takes that pressure and that demand away. Addressing instructions to the wall and indirectly, this always makes people feel a bit weird. But just like, I wonder whether Charlie could go and get their shoes from upstairs. So just wondering aloud, talking to the wall, giving an instruction indirectly. Wondering aloud is really good. It really works. It always still surprises me in sessions when I do that. Making activities a challenge. This is also really good. This works with toddlers as well. I do this with he's not a toddler now, he's 4. But I do it with him all the time still now. So I bet you can't do this. Bet you can't do this faster than me. Bet you can't do this. But, bet you can't do this by the time this runs out. And that works really well as well, rather than, you need to do this, just say, I bet you can't do this in the time it comes to this. So I did there's a boy in a school that I see that, and his teaching assistant, but all the best will in the world, they're absolutely fabulous. But was like, I just can't get them to do anything. When he's decided he doesn't want to do it, he doesn't want to do it. So I sat down, I was like, right, let's turn this on its head, let's see. So I just tried doing it as a challenge, and I said, I bet you can't do this by the time that I count backwards from 20. So did it, and he'd done the first sentence by the time I got to 20. And then he ended up by like the third one saying, try 14, and it became a thing, and he managed to do kind of a whole page of sentences, and just that really small tweak of making it a challenge, whereas he'd got into a massive battle of wills with his teaching assistant about doing any sentences. So we're going to the next page. Using humor. This always works, because it just makes light of a situation, makes things a bit daft and a bit playful. Making light of demands is a bit similar to what I was talking about before, like, it doesn't really matter if you don't do. You have to have negotiables and non-negotiables, and a big thing is picking your battles. What is important? What is important, what's not important. In a world where you're working with a young person with extreme anxiety in response to demands, okay, what's our priority right now? because it isn't going to be easy and it's going to take quite a bit of kind of, so are there things that you can kind of throw away and make really light of? Are there things that you can kind of say, all right, well, it doesn't matter as long as it's done by X, and just take that pressure away? Sometimes you can get peers to make requests or demands, or get them to follow peers. That can often be something that just reduces the demand because it feels a bit more natural and it's not an adult. There's something as well, I think, about adults placing demands that can be more tricky. So getting peers to make the request or the demand. Oh, using pets, puppets, puppy, and like puppies. I don't know why I put puppy specifically. Puppies are pets. I don't know. But that seems really weird, but it really works. Another one of the diagnostic things that we often see in people with a demand avoidant profile is they will use puppets or cuddly toys or pets to communicate. So they won't directly communicate. They don't want to do something. They'll say the dog doesn't want to do it, or they'll talk through a teddy. But using pets I know somebody who's got 2 dogs and they both have different personalities, and one dog's a bit timid and one dog's like a bit of that, like security guard kind of hard man. And they'll kind of talk to the young person and say, oh, I wonder what take me out for a walk today. Like, I'd really like to go for a walk. And it works. Like, the mum can't get them to do anything, but actually the dogs can get them to do a lot. And oh, puppets, I was meant to say, not puppies. I've put 2 pets and a puppy, so it's meant to be puppets. I need to get more sleep. Use of technology to set boundaries or demands. So timers, so that indirect, you're taking the pressure away from you're telling them to do something, and there's a timer there. But just kind of watch the demand of, I would say always allow more time, because it just reduces the demand. It doesn't make that kind of like, unless it's a challenge and they quite like that. But if it's something like, you know, oh, I need you to do, I had a girl that was really kind of struggling, and we managed to change her kind of curriculum. So she had a very non-directive curriculum where she had 5 tasks to complete in a morning, and she had 10 minutes to complete each task, and she had a timer. And when she finished that task, the timer would start when she started it. And then when she completed the task, she'd press stop, and any time banked. So say she completed the task in 8 minutes, she banked 2 minutes. And then the next task, if she didn't complete it, that was fine. She didn't bank any time. So the next task, she might have banked 5 minutes. So then at the end of the morning, she used that banked time to go on the iPad. So she might have had, you know, 8 minutes of banked time from kind of as a reward for, well, I got my activities done in that time. So there wasn't a punishment and a sanction. She just didn't get the kind of a reward and the additional time. Negotiating terms, you can negotiate. So, okay, right, you're really struggling with, you know, doing, I'm trying to think of an example. You're really struggling with, you know, going to have a shower now. Is there a time you feel like that could be okay for you? Or I've got a girl who has a bath every night, but they've negotiated that she has her hair washed twice a week and she won't go in the bath. She has it washed over the sink. So you can negotiate, as long as you keep in mind what it is that you want to kind of achieve from it. You can negotiate and it works beautifully. So if you look at the next slide. So this is a lot about language, the language that we use, and subtle tweaks to language can be really, really, really effective. So making subtle changes. So using we or us instead of you. So we need to tidy this up. Let's see if we can do this together. Or we don't do, you know, or we don't do kicking in this house. Or it's not okay for us to hit. So you take away that demand of you can't do that, you need to do this, and it makes it a more collaborative approach. And it's less of a demand. Using indirect commands to disguise demands and make them fun. So I bet I can get my coat on before you, or oh, can you show me how to do that? Because I don't know how to do that. Acting a bit daft and a bit like you don't do stuff, and they kind of take on that role as teacher works quite well as well. Try to make them feel useful, which also helps to kind of maintain that self-esteem, because a lot of kids with demand avoidant type autism have really kind of low confidence and self-esteem. Oh, it'd be really helpful if you could just help me with some sort of, you're absolute, you know, I know that you know your way around a computer, so it'd be really helpful if you could do this. Pretend you don't know, get it wrong. I do this all of the time. Normally it's probably because I don't know. And then ask them to teach you. So misread words in books, or ask them to show you how to do a task that you want them to do. Okay, if we go on the next slide. Offer limited choices to give a sense of control and autonomy. So this is kind of a bit more meat to the bones of what I've talked about. So do you want to have a bath or a shower tonight? So if they say, so, you know, the non-negotiable is you need to wash in some sense. So do you want a bath or a shower? So then once they've made that choice, okay, would you like to have your shower at 6 or 7? And then if you need to negotiate, they might say that they want the shower at 6:30 to retain a sense of control. And say that's okay. Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. 6:30 is fine. Because actually that's just no point in saying, no, I said 6 or 7, because actually that's okay. And then just beware that offering too many choices or open-ended choices can increase anxiety. You can also use a when-then. So when I've done my boring housework, then we can make some, you know, then we can make some cakes. So when we've done, you know, when we've had our shower, when you've had your shower, then we can do this. Controlling your voice. So like I said, not getting into a kind of a shouting match. So using a calm, even tone, especially when they're demand avoiding, which is really hard, especially if you're getting screamed at or getting things thrown at you. So try and kind of maintain a calm tone. And if you convey anxiety, stress, or anger in the tone of voice, they'll pick up on it, and then their kind of anger and anxiety will increase. Indirect praise. I'm trying to whiz through now, so I didn't know whether I'd fill an hour, but I have. Indirect praise. So praise might be perceived as a demand or an expectation to perform the same level again. So indirect praise. So talk to a relative about something that they've done while they're in earshot, and that might be more acceptable. So, oh, they bought me such a beautiful birthday present. It's like amazing. Look at it, not directly to them. Praise the object instead. So, oh, what amazing picture, that beautiful colours, rather than that's really good. Yeah, no problem. Okay, next slide. Yeah, I've already touched about on using props and puppets and pets and that kind of thing. Yeah, model desired behavior, but without an expectation that they have to do it. You just model how how we behave in those situations. Next slide. Oh, so then there's just a bit about, I've already talked about the assault cycle before. So if we go into the next slide, I just put a little bit here about when someone's at crisis, there's tip skills, distress tolerance skills, which you can find, you can Google, that if someone's in crisis can be really good to quite quickly bring them back down. So there's things like reducing temperature, exercise, breathing, and muscle relaxation that are known to have like physiological effects on the body. They bring your temperature down, they bring your blood pressure down, which can be calming. So when someone is in a crisis from kind of demand avoiding, using those tip skills can be a really good way of bringing them down from crisis. And the next slide. Yeah, so this is just what I was saying before. It's not about them putting them completely in control. It's about you being in control, but giving them a sense of feeling in control as well. Next slide. Or that, I think I finished.
I think that's it, just some further reading.
Yeah, so what I would say is Harry Thompson is he's very entertaining. He does lots of YouTube videos, but there's the PDA Society and Harry Thompson, and I've just put some books there on the end which are useful. So the PDA Paradox is written by Harry Thompson, but he's got loads of YouTube videos which are amazing. So sorry, I completely rushed the end then.
Sorry, Jess, thank you. That was so useful. I've checked the chat and I can't see any questions that have come through, but if anybody has any questions now, please feel free to put those in the chat box. We've got a few more minutes. Equally, if you want to send an email to info@ATtherapy, then we can send those over to Jess after the webinar. Please go back to
the tip slide.
Tip slide. Bear with me. My PowerPoint is just being a bit of a nightmare today. Here we go.
So if you're interested in tip skills and distress tolerance, it's from DBT, so dialectic behavior therapy. But the tip skills, you can find more information on Google. So reducing temperature, so that can be, it says here, like submerge your face in cold water. I don't kind of suggest that necessarily, but even running your wrists and hands under cold water under the tap can help. Or having a flannel or a cool pack on your head. It's just bringing your kind of like base body temperature down can help just to reduce your blood pressure and help you to kind of calm down in crisis. And go on, sorry.
No, carry on, Jess, it's okay.
A lot of the kids with ASD struggle with breathing. There is an app called Calm Harm as well that's got some really nice, it's used particularly for kind of self-harm and distraction, but there are some nice visual kind of stuff on there that you kind of have like bubbles that kind of show breathing. But yeah, if you want to Google tip skills, because it stands for like, temperature, intense exercise, paced breathing, impaired muscle relaxation, you can find out more, because it's a whole big thing. I find it really useful therapeutically.
Thanks, Jess. We're getting lots of positive feedback in the chat. Sarah Eccles says, what is your organisation? Can you go into my son's school and to teach them techniques?
I work for the NHS, so I kind of in the area where I work, so can do, but there are organisations that kind of are more queued up or wider than where I currently work that can go. I can maybe go.
It's just that my son's he has got ASD. He's diagnosed ASD with a demand avoidance profile. He's currently not in school, but he's still on roll there. They sent him off to a PRU unit.
Lovely. That's fun.
He's currently at alternative therapy. So but because it's low demand at the alternative provisions that he goes to, they're not seeing the behaviours that he was in this mainstream setting. But my his younger brother has just started there, and while presenting very differently. So JJ is loud and disruptive, not only to his own learning but those of others. His younger brother Gordon, who's just started there, is quiet and will sulk. So he's been spending up to 2 hours out of lesson because they can't. He's having an emotional response by crying and being upset. Any trying to attempt to engage with him just further exacerbates it, and it sets him off from ground zero, really. But they have spoken to me yesterday about Gordon needs to change his response when approached by an adult, because they're saying, oh, can you stop? It, particularly in reference to throwing acorns in the playground, they were talking about some children have started doing that. And they was like, we need to remember, boys, we're not throwing acorns in the playground. Gordon's response is to just get up and walk away. That's demand avoidance.
Yeah.
So,
where are you?
Chandler. That's the Chandler Junior School in Whitley and Godalming, Surrey.
Sarah, would it be okay if I shared your email contact with Jess to kind of continue this discussion outside of the webinar, just to be mindful of time?
I really feel as though it's the school. I mean, it's great us as a parent being able to come in on this, but it's really the the wider professionals, so like the schools that are having these interactions with them on a daily basis, and also the wider population as a whole. Like, they see us, the kids kicking off, and they're like, oh, is it a parenting problem? If it's not.
If they pass your email on to me, I'll kind of flag you, because you're in Surrey and we're down there. I can have a look at if I can put you in the right kind of direct, point you in the right direction.
Okay. Are you not Surrey then?
No, I'm in Greater Manchester.
Oh, okay.
But it's fine if you
if
get
you
your
could
email address.
signpost me to somewhere that's
Yeah, no problem.
Okay. How
So
do I go about?
I'll do that after the webinar. I'm just mindful that it's just past 1, so thank you everybody so much for coming today. Just to let you know, I've just whizzed through these slides, but there's some additional resources for you through our social media channels. Our next webinar is on the 24th of November, and the title is on screen now. We also have lots of other training available, such as Makaton, Play Included, Talking Maths and AAC Building Blocks. Just go on our Eventbrite if you want to know any more information. We've also got a fantastic event coming up in December for our mentor team, which is at our office space in Oldham. If anyone's free to come and have mince pies and meet the mentors. And then finally, I just wanted to let you know that we are hiring. So if anybody is interested in a job with us, please send your CV into the info@attherapy.co.uk email. Okay, I think that was it, Jess. Lots of positive feedback in the chat. So thank you so much for your time today.
Very well.
I'm going to stop recording now, and it will go on the YouTube channel.